So I'm going to explain how this works, right? So all of my vocals will basically start off here in the pre-vox bus. So everything's going to go into here, and if you can see, my input is straight to pre-vox, comes out of that into main vox. So that's going to go to another bus. And all that's in this right here is just some EQ to clean up, some compression to control transients, some de-essing to control the plosives, and an SSL channel strip to just create a tonal start to see how it adjusts. I don't do anything really, I just kind of flatten everything out, I zero everything out. I leave the high band, it's at 6K, and that's just got some air under it. You know, obviously I scale that to taste. It leaves that, goes into the main vox. This bus has a lot more stuff, multi-band, EQ, compression. You know, this has some subtractive EQ, some dynamic EQ. You know, I got another SSL in there, and, you know, put some more air into it, some de-essing. You know, I use that again. CLA2A, this is just to, you know, start to bring the vocal up into the mix to get it to cut through. And then some reverb on that bus. I do have separate reverbs and delays on separate auxes to use those to taste, obviously. But so yeah, so send your vocals into one bus, have that bus leave and go into another bus, and then if you feel like that's not enough, you can send it to another bus, which I do here on a final. I call it the Vox final bus, so everything leaves that second bus into the third one, and then I'll address, you know, with some silk. This will control the lows, mids, and highs. Just a good starting point, along with vitamin, which is also, you know, compression, multi-band, just to kind of keep everything in check. I want to see if I can push it as loud as I can without having the dynamics get out of control. And then obviously, ultimately, once you hit that last bus, that's going to leave there and go to the final, the mix bus, which is where I do all my mastering processing, and all my processing is done on that, which then leaves and goes to the master bus. So I hope that helps a little bit on multi-bus processing and how to route your stuff. You know, I'm a firm believer that that's what makes vocals cut through the mix so clean and crisp and clear, and you know, you can really dive into the dynamics and the frequencies, you know, across the board for each of your vocals. And you know, you have the ability and the control to pick and choose which vocals you want to go through that full sequence. You know, some, you know, ad-libs, backing vocals, harmonies, stuff like that, you know, you might not feel needs to leave the pre-vox bus. So if you want to just treat them separately, you can. You could just send them directly to the pre-vox, and then that's it. Or, you know, vice versa, if you want to send them to the main vox only because they're not going to need all that treatment, you can do that as well. Just a you know, my approach on things. And you know, I've been mixing and mastering and engineering for over 20 years, and it's, you know, it's been a lot of trial and error and trying out which ways work. And you know, this is a safe way to save CPU as well. You don't have to load up plugins. You know, you definitely don't want plugins doing too much work. You know, if you're expecting one compressor to do all the work, you're wrong. You know, you got to use all the tools in the toolbox to get the perfect sound. But there is a specific way that you want to do it so that you're not pushing, you know, your sound of your vocals, you know, beyond repair. You don't want to create a problem that doesn't exist, if that makes sense. Hope this helps.